بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Advanced Machine Learning Chapter 4 Unsupervised Learning أو Clustering Algorithms. في الشابتر ده هنتكلم يعني ايه Clustering Algorithms وامتى نعمل Clustering و Real World Applications of Clustering Clustering Structure Clustering Algorithms و Types of Clustering Algorithms و The Top 8 Clustering Algorithms. أول حاجة يعني إيه clustering؟ clustering هو unsupervised machine learning task. You might also hear this referred to as cluster analysis because of the way this method works. Using a clustering algorithm means you are going to give the algorithm a lot of input data with no labels. عشان احنا اتفقنا ان هو unsupervised يعني فيه data input بس معرفش ال output بتاعها ملهاش label and let it find any grouping in the data it can. فأي الداتا دي هنقسمها لمجموعة من الجروبس أو مجموعة من الكلاسترز. الجروبينجز دي بنسميها clusters. فالكلاستر هو group of data points that are similar to each other based on their relation to surrounding data points. كل نقطة بنشوف اللي حواليها متشابهين في الفيتشرز، ده بيبقى اسمه grouping أو cluster. Clustering is used for things like feature engineering and pattern discovery. زي الرسمة اللي قدامنا دي data set with clear cluster structure. علشان نعمل clustering للداتا set دي when to use clustering when to use a set of unlabeled data, it's very likely that you will be using some kind of unsupervised learning algorithm. There are a lot of different unsupervised learning algorithms like neural network, reinforcement learning, and clustering. The specific type of algorithm you want to use is going to depend on what your data looks like. You might want to use clustering when you're trying to do anomaly detection to try and find outliers in your data. It helps by finding those groups of clusters and showing the boundaries that will determine whether data point is an outlier or not. If you are not sure of what features to use for your machine learning model, clustering discovered patterns you can use to figure out what stands out in the data. Clustering is especially useful for exploring data you know nothing about. وفي الآخر أي unlabeled data أنا مش عارف عنها حاجة، الكلاسترنج هو أفضل حاجة نستخدمها. It might take some time to figure out which type of clustering algorithm works the best, but when you do, you will get invaluable insights on your data. You might find connections you never would have thought of. Real-world applications of clustering: fraud detection in intruder, categorization box in library, customer segmentation in marketing. It can also be used in larger problems like earthquake analysis or city planning. Whole corpus analysis navigations, better use interface, search without typing. For improving recall in search applications, better search result like pseudo-RF. For better navigation of search results, effective user recall will be higher. For speeding up vector space retrieval, cluster-based retrieval gives faster research. Hierarchy للclustering: لو أنا عندي URL مثلا ومنه hierarchies is not clustering, but is kind of output you want from clustering. صنفنا الداتا بتاعتي ل agriculture, biology, physics, computer science, space. دي كلاستر أو جروبينج. كل جروبينج ليه اسم معين. طيب الكلاستر اللي اسمه agriculture ممكن يتقسم ل dairy، crops، agronomy، forestry. يعني دي أكتر من كلاسترز جوه الكلاستر دي. في كلاستر اسمها biology، جواها botany، cell evolution. في physics، في computer science مثلا جوا AI HCI courses وهكذا. ف a good news automatic clustering gives an effective news representation metaphor. cutter gather أو cutting Krieger and Pedersen. لو أنا عندي مجموعة من الفيتشرز المتشابهة بنصنفهم بنعملهم جذر مع بعض. علشان الأول بنعمل سكاتر إن احنا نقسمهم. بعد كده اللي ليهم علاقة ببعض بنعمل لهم جذر مع بعض، فهو سكاتر جذر، أو ممكن نقول cutting Karger and Pedersen. Visualization the non-visualized. For improving search call cluster hypothesis documents in the same cluster behave similarly. هو بيفترض ان الكلاستر الدوكيومنتس اللي في نفس الكلاستر بتؤدي نفس الأداء أو بشكل متشابه، بيكون سلوكها متشابه with respect to relevance of information needs. Therefore, to improve search recall, cluster docs in corpus apereo. When a query matches doc, also return other docs in the cluster containing the. Hope if we do this, the query car will also return docs containing automobile, because clustering group together docs containing car with this containing automobile بأنهم متشابهين. Why might this happen? Grouping search result. Flat algorithms أو في hierarchical algorithms. Flat algorithms usually start with random partial refine it iteratively زي ال k-means أو model based clustering. ال hierarchical algorithms زي bottom up agglomerative top down level. Partitioning methods construct a partition of n documents into a set of k clusters. هما n documents عايز أقسمهم على k clusters. Given set of documents a number k. Find partition of k clusters that optimizes the chosen partitioning. Interconnected for many objective functions. Flat algorithms usually start with random or partial refine it والhierarchical ده نفس الكلام اتعاد تاني. دي real world applications. types of clustering algorithms. في أنواع مختلفة من clustering algorithms زي density based clustering, distribution based clustering, centroid based clustering, hierarchical based clustering. في density based clustering data is grouped by areas of high concentration of data points surrounded by areas of low concentration of data points. Basically, the algorithm finds the places that are dense with data points and calls those clusters. The great thing about this is that the clusters can be any shape. You aren't constrained to expected conditions. The clustering algorithm under this type don't try to assign outliers to clusters so they get ignored. تاني نوع distribution based clustering. With distribution based clustering approach, all of the data points are considered parts of cluster based on probability that they belong to a given cluster. It works like this. There is a center point and distance of data point from the center increases the probability of its being a part of the cluster. يعني كل ما المسافة بين السنتر بوينت والداتا بوينت اللي أنا عايزة أشوفها تبع الكلاستر ده ولا لأ، كل ما المسافة دي تزيد كل ما تقل احتمالية إن هي تكون تبع الكلاستر ده. فهي ده depending on distance أو depending on distribution، يعني عشان كده هو اسمه distribution based clustering. If you aren't sure of how the distribution in your data might be, you should consider different types of algorithms. Centroid based clustering is one you probably hear about the most. It's little sensitive to the initial parameters you give, but it's fast and efficient. These types of algorithms spread data points based on multiple centroids in the data. Each data point is assigned to a cluster based on its squared distance from the centroid. This is the most commonly used type of clustering. Each data type point Each data point is assigned to a cluster based on its square distance from centroid. Hierarchical based clustering is typically used on hierarchical data, like you would get from a company database or taxonomies. It builds a tree of clusters so everything is organized from the top down. This is more restrictive than the other clustering types, but it's perfect for specific kinds of data. Hierarchical clustering divides dataset at different layers and forms tree-like clustering structure. The dataset division may cause bottom-up aggregation policy or top-down splitting policy. The hierarchy of clustering is represented in tree graph. The root is the unique cluster of all samples, and the leaves are the cluster of only a sample. Top 10 clustering algorithms. Now we can have some background on how clustering algorithms work and the different types available. We can talk about the actual algorithms you will commonly see in practice. We'll implement these algorithms on an example dataset from sklearn library in Python. We'll be using the make classification data set from the sklearn library to demonstrate how different cluster problems and clustering algorithms, agglomerative hierarchy clustering, birch algorithm, affinity propagation clustering algorithm, main shift clustering algorithm, optics algorithm. شرح كل واحد فيهم بداية من ال key means. Most commonly used clustering algorithm هو centralized based algorithm. The simplest unsupervised learning algorithm deals with unlabeled data. This algorithm tries to minimize variance of data points within cluster. It is also how most people are introduced to unsupervised machine learning. K-means is the best used on smaller datasets because it iterates overall of the data points. That means it will take more time to classify data points if there are a large amount of them in the data set. Since this is how K-means clusters data points, it doesn't scale well. K-means clustering algorithm select set of random points as cluster centroids Assign each point to a specific cluster. Change the cluster centers until optimal solution. Assume documents are real valued vectors. Cluster based on centroid, centroid of gravity or main of points in cluster. Reassignment of instance to cluster is based on distance of the current cluster centroid, or one can equivalently phrase it in terms of similarities. بعد كده select k random documents بشكل random هم عددهم k لأن اسمه k mains as seeds until clustering convergence or other stopping creation. For each doc di, assign di to the cluster cj such that distance xi is minimal. Next, update the seed to be the centroid of each cluster. For each cluster ci sj equal mu للcj. يبقى big seeds بعد كده reassign clusters بعد كده compute centroids بعد كده reassign clusters compute centroid reassign clusters converged لحد ما نوصل لأفضل نتيجة. Several possibilities: fixed number of iterations, dock partitions unchanged, centroid positions don't change. Does this mean that the docks in cluster are unchanged? Why should the key-means algorithm ever read a fixed point state in which clusters don't change? Key-means is a special case of general procedure known as the expectation maximization (EM). EM is also known or is known to converge. Number of iterations could be large, but in practice usually isn't. Key-means clustering aim to partition n observations into k clusters, in which each observation belongs to the cluster with the nearest main, serving as prototype of the cluster. For k-means algorithm specify the fine number of clusters, then divide n data objects into k clusters. The clusters obtained meet the following conditions. Objects in the same cluster are highly similar. The similarity of objects in different clusters is small. Sample of used dataset: customer ID, Jane, age, annual income, spending score. أول حاجة هعمل importing للlibraries اللي هنحتاجها زي numpy matplotlib وpandas. بعدين قرأت الداتاست. بعدين قرأنا الجزء الانبوت منها الإكس. بعدين from sklearning cluster import k-means عشان نستدعي k-means. وبعدين اديناله البارامترز بتاعته. بعد كده استخدمنا k-means dot fit دالة الفت. وبعدين ممكن نعمل بلوت علشان نشوف الشكل. وهنا visualization للكلاسترز. دي البارامترز بالشرح بتاعها. مقصود ان clusters مقصود بيها number of clusters initial random center و maximum number of iterations tolerance number of parallel jobs. والايكويشنز اللي هنستخدمها fit و fit predict y و predict و score to measure the performance و inertia set of square distance between points للcost function يعني. ده implementation علشان نطبق مثال على بعضه ونطبع في الآخر الواي بريد والواي هنا مثلا هما n clusters لما كان ب5 هيدينا سكور بكام لما كان 20 سكور بكام لما كان 100 سكور بكام. When number of clusters increases of course this decreases but it takes more time to set the clusters. Number of clusters n clusters هو hyperparameter. Optimal value of n clusters lead to optimal performance. عشان كده احنا المفروض نعمل optimization عشان نوجد أفضل عدد لل n clusters اللي هيديلي أداء كويس. BT scan clustering algorithm شغال ازاي؟ هو density based spatial clustering of application with noise. It's a density-based clustering algorithm. Unlike k-means, هو بيقدر يديتكت ال outliers between the high density clusters. We use two parameters to determine how clusters are defined. Main BT, minimum number of data points, و ABS, distance used to determine data point is the same area. ده مثال import libraries وبعد كده بيلود الداتا وبعد كده بيطبق البي دي سكان وبيديله البارامترز بتاعته وبيحسب السكور. بعد كده في agglomerative hierarchy clustering algorithm وهو شبه ال hierarchy clustering algorithm. This form of bottom-up clustering وده المثال اللي بنطبقه عليه والبارامترز اللي هو بياخدها هنا اسمه ag clustering model. بياخد برضو number of clusters والaffinity والlinkage ونستخدم الدوال اللي هي fit برضو وfit predict علشان اديها الاكسترين وأحسب قيمة الواي predict train وادي الاكس تيست واحسب قيمة الواي predict test. وبعد كده ممكن نرسم hierarchical graph باستخدام دندوجرام. وبعدين استخدمنا بولت علشان أحدد التايتل والإكس ليبل والواي ليبل وبعد كده أرسم ببولت دوت شو. the same هنا احنا بس المرة دي بنرسمها بشكل سكاتر علشان كل لون هنا بيعبر عن كلاستر معين. كلاستر 1 مثلا باللون الأحمر، كلاستر 2 بالبيبي بلو، كلاستر 3 جرين، أو لأ كلاستر 2 بالبلو بس دارك بلو، كلاستر 3 جرين، كلاستر 4 بيبي بلو، كلاستر 5 بيربل. Gaussian mixture model algorithm بيشتغل إن هو بيتبع circular format. The way k-means calculate the distance between data points has to do with circular path. طريقة إن أنا بحسب ال distance اللي احنا بنعملها في ال k-means هو هنا بيعملها بس في circular path. ده مثال على استخدامه. بعد كده بيرش algorithm بيشتغل better بشكل أفضل on data into little summaries that are clustered instead of original data points. وده تطبيق عليه ممكن نبص عليه بالتفصيل. Affinity propagation clustering algorithm. You don't have to tell this algorithm how many clusters to expect in the initialization parameters. مش لازم نحدد عدد الكلاسترز في الحالة دي، هو هيتوقعها. والمين شيفت بيشتغل ازاي؟ هو شبه البيرش algorithm because it also finds clusters with initial number of cluster being. It works by iterating over all data points and shift them towards the mode. in the context is the high density area. That's why you might hear this algorithm referred to as mode-seeking algorithm. It will go through this iterative process with each data point and move them closer to where other data points are until all data points have been assigned to cluster. ده الimplementation بتاعه we optics algorithm ordering points to identify the clustering structure. Find meaningful cluster in data that varies in density. ده الimplementation بتاعه وشكرا.